Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and to speak with you. I heard about the Vertical Crypto Residency program a lot. It's the first time I'm actually part of it in some form. I'm making mostly web-based generative art and have been doing so since 2006 or 7, so quite a while. And started making NFTs like sometime last year, and it works really well for me, so I'm still doing that. Right now I'm in Switzerland. I'm based in Switzerland, and at the moment I'm in Zurich at the Kunsthalle preparing an exhibition. I have posted a link in the chat for you to check out, so if you're near Switzerland, you should come by and check it out. It's going to be epic. I was also just in a super nice exhibition in Berlin. I haven't been there in person, but maybe you have. That Mikhail and the team curated and prepared and also made an ethics hash drop in that context. And we just closed that exhibition and it was a big success and everyone was pretty happy with it. And I'm looking forward to new projects and hopefully next exhibitions.
Fabulous. Can you tell me how you and Jonas know each other?
We met in London at Proof of People, where everyone else met too, like nearly everyone. It was a pretty epic event because like so many people from the space were there. I think we did not meet before that. I'm not sure actually. I think not.
No.
And then we also met in Switzerland recently because he was here in Zurich. So we went together. We went for dinner with Lonely Boy, who was also in Switzerland. So it's actually quite random that we know each other. But it's nice because I think like vertical crypto obviously plays a big role in connecting all kinds of people who are moving around in this space.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
yeah. Proof of People was really so cool. To really meet like people I only knew from the Twitter basically. And I don't know if it's ever gonna be like this again, to be honest, but let's see. It was kind of like cozy, right?
Yeah, totally. I hope there will be a new edition of this, absolutely, because we are all like very decentralized and disconnected. So having events that are actually really just for our scene, for our group to connect and get to know each other is like really an awesome thing. It's also quite stressful because not everyone is like super social or able to travel the world in terms of like time and money and whatever. But when it's possible and we make it happen, it's always like a really amazing event and experience overall. And I hope that Vertical Crypto and Mikhail in particular has the energy and the funds to make another one happen.
By the way, I was also at Proof of People. It was such a hectic event that unfortunately I wasn't able to meet everyone because so much needed to get done. And I am very happy at how everything turned out. It was an amazing event. And I can tell you very hush hush that yes, there will be more of those. Hopefully, if everything goes well, if the world doesn't destroy itself, I guess we'll meet soon again.
Nice, nice. Love to hear that. I'm not sure if we actually met before because I also really don't remember all the faces from London because it was so many people and so much was going
Hmm.
on. It was crazy. And I'm really not good with remembering names or faces. So if we met before, I probably like forgot about it or whatever. I'm very sorry. I'm
Don't worry
super
about
bad
it.
at this.
It was really hectic. Actually, so many people came, visitors and artists and speakers. It was pretty spectacular, and I'm really happy that I got to be a part of it. So I hope that we do it again soon.
Nice, cool. I was unable to go to the opening of the In Touch exhibition in Berlin, but I have seen some pictures and I heard it was really good and pretty packed. So I think like events are super important for us as a scene, as a group. We should have as many as possible of that.
I think so too. And it's really amazing that bigger companies are willing to partner up and provide funds and assistance and help with the creation of such events. It was really something out there for me to be able to meet so many of the people that usually are just Twitter accounts that we communicate with. So it definitely puts the human touch in all of this and reminds you of why we are actually doing this entire decentralized journey.
Yes, totally, absolutely.
There
I
is a
see
question. Yep.
Victor is saying that I wasn't in Valencia, which is true. I'm very sorry about that. I also missed you. I was at Art Basel in summer and then at Proof of People. And then I also like met a bunch of people like just in Switzerland and around Switzerland, and it was like a lot of traveling for me and a lot of socializing compared to Corona times and not before Corona. So I was pretty exhausted and therefore made the decision to not go to Valencia. Probably a mistake, but I was just too exhausted. Have you all been there?
No, I was in
Me
Berlin.
neither.
Oh, okay. So Victor lives there. That's very handy. So my creative process, I'm not sure how much I can explain about my creative process because I don't know either, to be honest. If I would understand my own creative process, I guess my life would be a lot simpler. So I really don't know how it happens and how exactly I do it. So every time I accept a project or a deadline, it's extremely stressful up to the point where I actually have something that I find good. I hope like someday I will find like a reproducible recipe or like some kind of process that I can just repeat. But I'm super stressed out about like finding something that I find really good for a drop or a project or an exhibition. And so far, it's not really like something that I feel good about or that I can easily reproduce or just approach in a very relaxed way because usually when I start, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. The only thing that I have is basically a repository, a folder where my website lives, where I have a ton of unfinished and half-assed and rough ideas. And every now and then I go through these ideas and try to sort of like push them along and maybe pick one and develop it for a drop or an exhibition or whatever. And that's the only thing I have. I guess it's like an artist studio, but in a very digital mobile form. And that's the only thing I have. It continuously escalates, and there are more and more folders with like new code and old code and stuff I already forgot about. So sometimes I'm lucky and I find something that I didn't even remember I have. And sometimes I go through the ideas and through the folders, and everything seems like completely lame and boring. So I guess it really depends on the mood and the weather a lot. In general, I would say like I usually start with like sketching ideas, not on paper but in code, and sort of like work from like rough sketches or drafts, and then when something becomes more concrete and I try to finalize it, I do a lot of testing and sort of check it on all resolutions and devices and sort of like try to explore the parameter space and all the variations it can do. But it's like very strange to sort of understand when something is good or when it is actually not good, and usually it's just a deadline that forces me to make a decision what I pick.
We have some people writing down.
I see. You guys can also just speak. It's okay. I guess. I don't know.
Okay, I have a question. Like when you have these sketches and you explore the parameter space, like you said, do you actually have a user interface? Do you like build sliders into that and then just play with that, or do you automate that somehow, or how do you do that?
I usually just randomize parameters, like pretty much in the way it would happen when someone mints on FX hash, for example. And I just reload the code that I'm running a ton of times, like tens, 100s, thousands of times. So what I don't have is some sort of process where I render like hundreds of previews or something in a grid. I don't do that. I just focus on the individual result and invest time to basically look at 5, 10, or 100 outputs, or how many I can do. And the biggest challenge with that is when you have animated work, like basically whenever you make a small change, you need to spend a minute or 5 minutes or however much time to sort of like understand how the animation changes. So in a way that my biggest problem is that I'm trying to create work that is sort of like beyond my own attention span, because I like to move really fast, but when you have an animation, it really just takes a lot of time to actually experience it and look at it. And in theory, like whenever you make a small change, everything can change as a result of that. So you need to spend a lot of time just staring at the screen and understand what changes, and do this multiple times. And if you multiply all these things, it just takes a lot of time to do, basically.
I see. Thanks.
There's user interfaces that you can build into the sketch. I think one is called that GUI, where you can hook up parameters to sliders. I try to avoid that, and just usually I make something that is clickable. I click on the window and it reproduces the whole thing. And I try to avoid having like complex combinations of too many variations, because it quickly gets out of hand, and then you don't understand what exactly can happen, and then there are like many blind spots that are unpredictable, and you sort of try to have some sort of control, not absolute control, but like as much control as possible over the parameter space, in order to avoid people minting stuff that looks completely unexpected. So sometimes I do some like a parameter change, or like a special color, or like some composition that is like very rare, as I say, and happens like with a very low frequency, but I still try to have pretty much as much control over it to still feel comfortable with releasing it.
Hi, Leonard. Nice to hear your voice instead of reading your tweets. I've got many questions I could do, but what do you prefer to work? Do you prefer to work in long form, or you prefer to do one or small editions?
Hey, Victor. Also nice to hear your voice. I love working on long form stuff, especially since last year, and especially since having some like first experiences with FX hash, and also like with stuff like art blocks and similar platforms, because honestly, it is a lot of fun. And it can get very deep, and it's just like a nice challenge to work on long form stuff. But I also love working on like simple ideas, very quick sketches, and just one-of-ones, basically, which used to be the default for like many years before long-form generative design was really a thing. Back in the days, I also did some long-form stuff, but people wouldn't get it, and it didn't make as much sense. And now I would say there is definitely some economic pressure to, instead of working on many small one-of-ones or like single ideas, to actually make good long-form stuff, because financially it's like a lot more valued, and it's easier to sort of make a living if you focus on long-form stuff, I would say. So it's about the fun and about how you work and like sort of what your process is. But there's definitely also, I would say, a strong economic incentive to produce stuff that will eventually work as a drop on a platform with a high edition number. So you can basically still sell it for maybe not that much money, but it's still enough to make a living and have a good return for it. So, for example, if I work on a unique piece on a one-of-one, and I somehow get lost in it, and I end up working on it for like a week or 2 or 3 weeks or even a month, then it's very hard for me to sell it at a price that is high enough to actually justify that and to make it a sustainable practice like that. Which sometimes I think this is definitely a problem, and I regret that, and I'm not a fan of this pressure or this gravity towards long form, I would say, but that's just how it is at the moment.
Yeah, I also feel this pressure now. How this is hard to deal with the market and the creation. No, you are full time working as an artist right now.
Yes, I'm full-time working as an artist since I have always been an artist and doing digital art, but I was always working in web agencies and sort of like did commercial design. And I'm a full-time artist now for about a year. And now the markets are definitely like down a lot, so it's a lot harder to make a living than it was last year, for example. So it definitely creates some sort of pressure to think about what you do and where you release it and how much it costs. Because in the end, you need to make it work somehow to keep it sustainable. It's not like I'm rich or have fuck you money, so I actually need to take care of finding some sort of balance between like being creative and having fun, but also making a return and sort of like making sure that the economic side of what I sell and where I sell it kind of works out for me in the long term. Which is hard to predict how it will be in a few months or maybe next year. But like the only thing that I know for sure is that I'm trying to survive the bear market without getting wrecked. So I need to focus on also on the economic side, I would say.
Yeah, totally. I am totally on the same feeling. No, it's hard to keep this equilibrium when you jump straight to working as an artist. I wanted to ask you about the you usually work with CSS, no, or and not so much on Canvas, more SVG and CSS. Do you have any particular libraries that you would recommend in that regard?
No, actually, I don't. I used to, before I was a full-time artist, I was a web developer, so I would work with HTML and CSS all day, like professionally, to make websites mostly and applications. So therefore, I feel very good about using HTML and CSS for making simple stuff. And the same is true for SVG. And I'm also like, I would say I'm a hardcore minimalist. So I'm really not a friend of libraries. And I try to keep things extremely simple as I possibly can. So I'm actually not using any libraries, to be honest. When I do 3D stuff, I use 3JS sometimes, for example. But I'm trying to keep it like very low level and very simple. Because that forces me to also keep the art very simple, and I just like that way of working. I would say when I was younger, I used a lot of JavaScript libraries for everything, and I have seen all these things going out of style over time or sort of like disintegrate because they are no longer maintained. And I'm trying to create art that basically is independent and self-contained in a way so that it can also still work in 10 years or 100 years or whatever, which is obviously like hard or impossible to predict, but I'm trying to basically do my part by keeping things very simple and using as little external dependencies as possible.
Why did you decide to publish like your project so that you can see the code actually? It's like basically open source, right? One could say, no?
Yes, it's open source. I never made the decision to actually publish that. That's just in the nature of the medium. Like when you make websites or when you make a drop on a platform, everyone can go and look at the code. I never intended to publish this in terms of oh, look at my code. My code is so elegant, because I really don't think that I'm a good programmer, or that my code is something that a lot of people can learn a lot from or benefit from. I'm doing mostly very simple, primitive, sometimes very stupid stuff. So I think the smart thing is to not look at my code and actually read someone else's code who is better at programming. But yes, it's true. Everyone can look at the stuff. And that's intimidating. It's also freeing. It has pros and cons. Honestly, if I would need to make the decision to publish it, I probably never would. But because of the nature of the medium, it's just a default that everything is open and visible. And I think while we are doing this, and because people can read the code anyways, I never minify the code. I don't obfuscate the code, and I try to keep it sort of readable. So if you open my project and you look at the code, you will actually be able to read exactly one-to-one the code that I wrote. This is the code that is in my text editor, and this is the same code that you are running in your browser. So I think it's sort of good manners, if you will, to keep your code clean and more or less readable by others. I think in some cases, I have minted a couple of one-of-ones on Hikanunk or Theia that are based on shader codes. So that's GLSL, which is sometimes very short and very concise. And I have minted some artworks that actually include the code for the artwork in the artwork's description. Because sometimes it's just fascinatingly elegant and simple. But whenever I do something that is longer than just a couple of lines of code, I usually consider it like a horrible mess. And honestly, most of the cases I would prefer if nobody looks at it. It's kind of embarrassing. I don't know how. Sorry?
No, I don't think that a generative artist also has to be a great, super professional coder. I think being an artist, at least that's how I see it, also frees oneself of being like a perfect, technical coder. So you should not be embarrassed. That's all what I say. Also, I don't think it's embarrassing. It looks very complex, what I see.
Okay, that's nice. No, I also think my job is not to be like an expert programmer or to write sort of clean or efficient production code. Still, it's a personal thing where you expose yourself to everyone else to some degree. And of course, that is always to some level, that is just an embarrassment, I think. It's just natural. It's not I feel super bad about it, but it's also not like that I'm super proud of my code. I know there's definitely other people who create their own libraries and have very strong opinions about how exactly your code should look, how you should structure your project and everything. And I'm absolutely not like that, but I definitely also have a lot of respect for these people who are way smarter than me and always have extremely clean files where the structure is perfect, everything is labeled perfectly, and all the names are nice and everything. I think future generations will be very happy about this. But most of my work is just single JavaScript files with a lot of complete mess in it, a lot of comments, a lot of variables and stuff that maybe doesn't even do something. So sometimes it's actually pretty embarrassing and definitely also misleading if you would try to read it and understand it. Victor is asking if I'm minting outside of Tezos. Yes, I have been minting on Foundation and also with a manifold contract on Ethereum, which used to be very expensive when I got started. Now it's sort of cheaper. I actually wanted to do more on Ethereum, but somehow I'm really deep into Tezos and the whole culture and the ecosystem, and the best community is on Tezos, I feel. That's just where I have the best connections, and sort of most people I appreciate and work with are also on Tezos. So I feel it has a strong gravity in terms of just general culture. I really don't like that I completely depend on Tezos, so I plan to do more on Ethereum, also maybe Solana or other chains. But I'm also quite busy and I tend to forget about exploring other chains as much as I would like to. I also asked my best collectors, like, hey guys, I'm planning to mint on Solana, like, what do you think about this? And everyone was like, oh no, hell no, don't do it, we don't care, we don't like it, it's completely stupid. So not everybody is open about other chains. We'll see in the future. I definitely try to not have all my eggs in one basket, as they say, because I think that's very risky. And I definitely want to be present on different chains with different stuff, and of course also have access to different collector bases that are maybe not all on Tezos or just like on different chains. And I think there's also different market dynamics on different chains, which you can use as an artist or as a collector. So I'm planning to definitely explore more in different directions. Victor is asking about color. For my first years when I started coding, I was doing mostly black and white stuff because I felt completely overwhelmed by colors because making color choices is extremely difficult and hard. And I was like mostly busy just doing geometry stuff and dealing with geometry problems and composition and motion and rhythm and like everything else other than color. So at some point I had a sort of like a reputation to be the black and white guy, which I thought like is kind of not cool and sort of stupid and sad. So I made a conscious decision to be more colorful, work more with color and explore color more. And now I usually work with a couple of strong primary colors, and for like a couple of months now, maybe like almost a year, I have started to work with the same color palettes and reuse them. I actually have like a file with colors that I include in different projects. It also works very well with long-form generative art to have like different color themes that it can reuse. And it has like almost to some degree, I would say it's subtle, but you can see it. It has become like my brand and sort of something that you can recognize if you look at different works that I've done, that I'm reusing color schemes between like one drop and the next drop or project. And I think this is a very nice way to be recognizable and develop some sort of signature that people can either explicitly recognize or just subconsciously feel that something is maybe made by you. And it's also very helpful to, like, if you start a new project or have a quick idea that you don't need to make color choices every time, all the time, but you have like some good options that you can reuse and that work for you. I also recently I found some very good color libraries that allow you to do super smart and exciting stuff with color. But my approach is just pretty dumb, to be honest. I have just some themes, some swatches, like between 4 and 5 colors that work well together. And I just reuse that without doing like any complex math. I don't really understand color spaces or something like that. I just have some good colors that go well together, and I reuse them frequently across whatever I do. Color libraries. I'm not sure. I think one is called Color.js, I guess. There's at least 2 or 3. One, I think, is made by some women who is famous in the CSS space. I think her name is Leah Veru or something. Not sure. There's also others, and there's definitely like color is a very deep topic. Artistically, of course, but also in terms of just math and the numeric aspects of it and the technical aspects of it. You can really get lost in it. I know some people here who are absolutely hardcore color nerds, and I think that's very interesting and very cool, but their work isn't that great. So I think like, hey, maybe you've lost your focus. Don't forget about the geometry. But there's definitely a lot to explore in the future, and its color is extremely endlessly deep and complex and complicated if you really want to go there. So far, I don't really see the return to approach it too scientific and too deeply, but this might change in the future, we'll see. I can definitely, one thing I noticed over the last year is that some people have their color schemes that they reuse, and when you scroll Twitter, even when you're like move really fast, some people are like very recognizable, and you can instantly see if something is by this artist or that artist. For example, like I always instantly recognize like Nicholas Sassoon or Pixel Fool or Lisa Earth. And I think that's a very cool like mechanism, especially in combination with a space that is extremely busy and crowded, and also social media. So if color is sort of like a brand of an artist, I really like that idea. It can also be like limiting and annoying over time, I guess. But I really like this idea because we all do different things over time. So, but if it's possible to instantly see that, okay, you are you, or that you basically see your friends like just from a first glance at your timeline, that's a really cool thing, I guess. Victor is talking about Oglo. Oglo is basically just text. It is connected to my background in web development and sort of like my quote-unquote fetish for keeping things very simple. So it's just text, and it's just a combination of 4 Unicode characters, like black and white, and a dense and a less dense dot grid. You know, there's Unicode characters with all kind of fancy symbols, and there's also some symbols that are just these grid blocks of different densities, basically. And Aglo is a combination of those, and I just agglomerate these modules again and again and again, and sometimes I change the combination, and then that creates a sort of pattern which also responds to how wide your screen is, and it just wraps basically exactly like text. You can also select it, it's really just text. And I explored this idea first in black and white, and then also did color versions and animated versions. And it's just something that I discovered and fell in love with because of the simplicity and the versatility of like this pattern as a strategy to explore different things. I made an FX hash drop, which was pretty successful. I still like the output. And then I also did one-of-ones and collections on Object, and I will definitely do future versions of this. Someone is right now creating tapestries and printing it. There will also be like aglos on fabric and all kinds of physical manifestations, I hope. It's also something I frequently use for testing new screens and setups. And just something that feels freeing to me because it's not a complex geometry, it's not very organic or like noise-based, or not using any complex math to draw something two-dimensional or three-dimensional. In a way, it's almost a one-dimensional piece because it's actually just a sequence of these symbols, and it's not really that I'm painting a canvas. I'm just putting together these sequences, like maybe like a DNA, and then this is wrapped by the page. And this is a really original and cool and fun approach to get a visual output, I guess. And the name Aglo stands for agglomeration, which is the space between the countryside and the inner city, where you have like buildings that are often like repetitive architecture. So if you take a train and you move from the inner city to the countryside, you see a lot of buildings, and they often have very repetitive patterns, which reminds me of sort of like the same visual rhythm that's contained in Aglo. So you don't control the output. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I mean that you are. That is interesting that you're creating just like one line string. No? So really, it really depends on the wrap of the page, which is the final
Yes,
output.
exactly. If you go to my website, there is a link to Kaloh, and you can open it. And you can resize the width of the web page, and then you will see that it basically rewraps the text, and the pattern that emerges as a result of this can completely change depending on making the page a bit wider or a bit more narrow. So it's very much a web approach where you just control something and everything else is controlled by the medium, and you give up a lot of control. And a lot of the output actually just really happens, and that's not controlled only by random on a canvas, but also by sort of like what the text setting is in your browser, how big your screen is, how long you interact with it, if you resize the window or not. And all these factors have like a pretty visible and dramatic impact on the work, which is something that many artists would freak out about, but that I really enjoy, sort of like this option to give up this control and just see what the medium does. Because usually that's hard to get, right? When you draw on a canvas, things don't just happen. You have to make very deliberate choices about what you draw. If you draw like a hard edge shape, or like something organic, or you work with pearly noise or whatever, but you need to control it at least to some degree and make decisions, and it usually doesn't like just happen. Jonas with a question for Gerhard. So Gerhard, basically inside the token there are a bunch of images, like 10 or 12 or something, which have been made by Richard Nadler. And the first thing that Gerhard does is that it picks 2 or 3 images, these textures, exactly. You can see it in the chat. Jonas is posting screenshots. This is basically where a lot of the information that Gerhard is using for the visuals and the animation is coming from. And the very first thing that a token does is it just selects 2 or 3 images from this bigger space of 12 images, and then it works with these, and it somehow combines the images. Some textures are used for colors, and some other textures are just used for motion, for example. And then there's some shader code in between that decides like which pixels are rendered and which pixels are not. And so the resulting output is obviously like very different from the input, but in some cases you can still see the input textures. And you can see like how some of the compositions of the input images show up in the final result. But others are also like completely distorted and transformed multiple times into like either a motion in a certain direction or just a very specific color. For example, like I'm using, let's say, like the red information of a pixel from one texture and the blue information of the texture of another texture, and maybe then I'm using the amount of red of a pixel to control how much something moves upwards or sideways, or I'm using like the blue information of a pixel of another texture to control if something renders in that specific position or not. So I'm kind of using the images as data in a way. So like if Gerhard uses like 3 textures, so for every pixel, that means I have red, green, and blue information times 3 because it's 3 textures. And then I'm using all these, basically these informations, this data to create new color and motion as a result.
That's super cool.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's a pretty abstract. It's like it's simple, but it's also a pretty abstract process.
I think there's a few things I don't I don't understand how they work with the buffers and stuff and the shaders. But yeah, no, the information is stored in the pixel itself, and you use that. I can understand that. And what I don't understand, to my understanding, if you upload a project and let's say there's 12 images, should not like each token have all these 12 images and then just pick 3 of them? Because if you look at
that's how it works. That's exactly what it does.
But in the screenshot, you only see like the selected images in the sources. It seems like
yes. I mean, like all the images are in all tokens, but I only load 3. So, like, if you look at the network panel in the browser DevTools, you will only see 3 because it's important. Like, if you're familiar with affix hash, it's sort of important to be able to generate a preview thumbnail image fast. So it's obviously not a good idea for every token to load like 12 images if actually I'm only using 3 images. So the first thing that the code does is it selects which 3 images that it will load from a list of available images, and then it just loads these 3 images and then works with those. So every token has all the images, but only uses some of them, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that I did not understand how the inspection tool actually just displays the ones that are loaded. I thought it would just display all the ones that are in the project, but it seems like it just shows the ones that are actually being loaded, right?
Yes, and the others are just like on the server or on IPFS as sort of like blind passengers for every project, I guess.
Okay, I see, thanks.
Victor is asking about P5. No, I don't use P5. When I started coding, I used processing for many years. I really love processing. It helped me get started with creative coding and generative art. It was super important. Also, like back in the days, everyone used processing because it was almost impossible to use the browser to draw something interesting. These days, because I'm a minimalist, I try to not depend on libraries, so I also don't use P5.js. And I also, like, honestly, I think these days browser standards have come a long way, and it's like sort of easy to do something in Chrome that looks the same in Firefox and in Safari and in Opera or whatever. And the APIs for drawing and the APIs for HTML and CSS, but also SVG, but also the Canvas API. Like, this stuff is pretty usable. So I think for most cases, I don't really see the need for P5.js. I guess it can do a lot of things, and there's certainly some tricks and things that P5.js makes a lot simpler. But because I'm a minimalist and sort of like try to make self-contained art that works in the long term, I actually don't use P5.js. That doesn't mean like that you shouldn't use P5.js. I just think like these days it's not as important and as relevant as it used to be. Gerhard was not a back and forth with Richard. It was completely a one-way work. He posted on Twitter like, hey, I'm looking for someone who does something with my images to animate them. And I was like, hey, okay, dude, that's an interesting request. Just give me some of your images and let me give it a try. Maybe I can do something interesting with it, maybe not. And this actually worked very well. It was completely not a back and forth. He just gave me some images and I created Gerhard with it, which is a result of the fact that it is very intimidating to do pair programming or actually work together with someone in a back and forth manner. 2 programmers or 2 artists working together is very interesting, but a huge, massive challenge. It's very difficult to sort of like work with the code of someone else. It's also very difficult to have someone else mess with your code. I have been a professional developer for a couple of years, so I have the technical skills and infrastructure to actually make this happen. But still, like on a creative level, on an artistic level, it's extremely hard to actually work together and collaborate. So we have a process that basically your work is important, but someone else is also important, and it's not like someone dominates and the other follows, and you're really like working together in a democratic sort of like quote unquote fair way, which is important, but like very hard to establish and extremely difficult. And I find it personally, I would love to do that in the future, but I find it like very intimidating and extremely challenging. So I'm explicitly looking for ways to collaborate with others in a one-way kind of process, if you will. Because that allows me to just give it a try without disappointing anyone else or getting into fights or starting projects that are maybe interesting in the beginning but then don't go anywhere, or even start fights with good friends of mine, which is absolutely not what I want to do. And I think this sort of like one-way collaboration method is something that works well for me. Just because really working together feels extremely intimate and also like intimidating. Also, side note, I think Richard can't code, so there is not really a way we could actually write code together. But it's also cool because that means like I can work with any artist, and there's not a requirement that both of us can like code equally well in the same language.
What's your bet on the actual market situation? You think we are going down for a long time, or you think we are going up soon?
I have no idea. Personally, I'm not an expert. I think most people that I know say we are going down for quite a while now. We will go down even further in the near future, and will take quite a while for the market to recover. I think everybody is very insecure and nervous about it. I don't know. I also hear some voices that say like, "Hey, look, the art market is not impacted," but I don't think this is true. At the same time, I really observed very recently that like my drop worked very well. Also, like when I see other people drop good art, I see it sells. So I would say if you make good art and you have a medium or a small audience, it absolutely works. It's not like the art market or the generative art market is dead. It works like just as well as it has last year, actually. Every time I do a new drop or a new project, I'm super nervous, and I think like, oh my god, like the market is so down, and trading volume stats and everything is down really bad, so probably nobody will care about my stuff and nobody will buy my work. But so far, I've been really lucky, and it turns out that every time I do something, people still buy it. I hope it stays like that, but I don't know. I have no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if it really gets a lot worse if people stop buying, but so far it seems to go well. I also still collect art from others and friends. So I'm not sure if this is just because of generative art and how it is connected to sort of like the bigger macro situation. I can also see that like if Corona comes back, or in general like the international situation with energy and the war and everything escalates or calms down or whatever, that will have a dramatic impact. But it seems all like extremely complex and unpredictable, and I really don't feel like that I have like any position to know what is going to happen. I'm very insecure about it. I have no idea where we'll end up. If we are still here next year or not, I don't know. I hope so. We'll see. in general, I would say like the most of people I talk to are very pessimistic at the moment. What would I recommend to a starting generative artist? I would recommend to be part of multiple communities and have your work on multiple chains. So make sure you are diversified and don't only put your projects and your artwork and also your time and attention on a single chain or a single platform. So try to do multiple things. And also like be very open. Don't listen to too many people and just try everything and give it a try and see what happens. And don't listen to sort of like rumors or opinions too much, and instead make sure that you are open and have experiences and learn from that. I think that's very important. I think having very strong opinions is cool, but like not even trying stuff because you heard someone else doesn't like it is not a good idea. I guess we are all here because we are open and curious in the first place, so that's a very important thing to consider. And I would also say study art history, look at art, look at a lot of other art, and don't only look at generative art. Look at contemporary art, go to museums, go to galleries as much as you can. It is really important. If you don't get how important it is, just go for it and invest time in art, and over time it will come together and you will understand how the older art connects to the new art. And it's very important to have like a broad picture of what else is going on in the arts, and especially also like what has happened in the last 50, 100, 1000 years or whatever. And sort of like try to actively take time to study and explore the history of art. And don't get irritated if you don't understand stuff or if stuff doesn't make sense, and just explore it, and over time it will sort of become more meaningful and reconnect to your own work. I hope that makes sense. I know not everyone is a fan of art history, and we're all very much in our hyper contemporary timelines, which are very focused on generative art or whatever. But I think it's extremely important to look at everything else too. And also, don't buy a Lambo whenever you make some money. Put the money on the side, and just try to survive the bear market. Don't spend all the cash when you make some. And be nice to others and try to stay humble no matter how successful you are in the short term. It will always change. And your main goal should be to sort of like survive in the short term, but also in the midterm and long term.
That sounds like a lovely moment for us to say stop. And we are right at the at the end time. Thank you so much for coming to share your knowledge with us. And yeah, it's a very weird, peculiar situation in the world right now. There's nothing really safe ever. And the only thing I know is that I'm really honored and happy that we have this community and that we support each other. And the art that all of you create is spectacular and makes me feel happier and optimistic about the world, because there's no way such beauty can be created and the world is not good for it to exist. So keep working on that. And Leander, thank you so much for giving us that time. I am wishing you huge success with your next exhibition. I wish I could be there to see it. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot of fun and very dope. And everyone from the residency, thank you as well for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Merci vielmals. I hope to see you all at the next Proof of People or some other event.
Me too. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
Lenny. Thank you. Bye bye.